They spotted a ship still sailing, yet no one answered from the deck. No distress flag, no smoke, just silence and the sound of waves. And one detail made it worse. The lifeboat was gone. This wasn't a legend invented in a tavern. It was late 1872, the open Atlantic, and a real merchant ship moving like it still had purpose. Another crew watched it from a distance, waiting for a signal that never came because what they were looking at wasn't a voyage. It was a question, and it was drifting toward them. The ship was the Mary Celeste, built for commerce, not mystery. A working vessel with a captain, a crew, and a routine destination. Nothing about it should have been memorable. But the ocean has a way of turning ordinary plans into permanent puzzles. And the first clue was how normal everything looked from far away, until they got closer. Weeks earlier, it had departed with a cargo meant to make money barrels of industrial alcohol and supplies bound across the sea. The kind of shipment that demands caution. Vapors, leakage, pressure changes, the constant fear of a spark. On a wooden ship, safe enough is never safe, especially when weather starts rewriting the route. The captain was experienced, methodical, someone who believed in procedures, logs, and prevention. He didn't sail like a gambler. He sailed like a man who planned to arrive, which makes what happened harder to explain, because the disappearance doesn't feel like chaos at first. It feels like a decision, made under pressure we can't see. Out at sea, problems don't arrive one at a time. Wind shifts, sail strain, water finds, seams, and every correction costs energy. The Mary Celeste moved through changing weather enough to rattle a ship's rhythm without breaking it. But somewhere in that slow grind, something triggered a choice so extreme that abandoning the ship felt safer than staying aboard. When the other ship drew near, they saw sails set in an odd combination, not wrecked, not fully controlled, like the vessel had been left mid-thought. That's the first unsettling pattern. The Mary Celeste didn't look attacked. It looked interrupted. An interruption at sea usually means one thing. Something happened fast enough to overrule discipline. A small boarding party climbed up the side, boots scraping wet planks, hands tight on rope. They called out, nothing, no footsteps, no shouted reply from below deck. And when you board a silent ship, your mind does a terrible thing. It starts narrating threats before evidence arrives, because silence is never neutral at sea. On deck, the air smelled like salt and damp canvas. Nothing screamed disaster. The ship wasn't burning. It wasn't splintered. The railings held. The rigging still made sense. That's when fear deepens, because a wreck is easy to understand. A perfectly functional ship with missing people is something else entirely, and it forces you to look closer. Below deck, the quiet felt heavier. A lantern area, a sleeping space, the tight geometry of ship life, everything designed to keep humans moving in a small world. But it was as if that world had been evacuated midday, not looted, not destroyed, just emptied. And that clean emptiness is where the story becomes disturbing, because it suggests intent. In the galley, there were signs of ordinary living utensils, a simple meal setup, water containers, the kind of mess sailors make without thinking. Nothing looked like a frantic fight, and that creates a question that won't let go. If the crew had time to leave in an orderly way, what convinced them they had no time to stay? The lifeboat absence sat over every room like a shadow, because a lifeboat is not for comfort, it's for surrender. It's what you choose when you believe the ship can no longer protect you. Yet the ship was still protecting itself, floating, sailing, surviving. So if they launched the boat, they were running from something specific, and they believed it was close. They inspected the cargo hold, barrels still stacked, not scattered like a storm had tossed them. That matters, because chaos leaves fingerprints. So does theft. But the Mary Celeste didn't look robbed. It looked like everyone left with the belief they'd return, which is the most tragic kind of confidence. When the sea is involved, the ship had taken on some water, not enough to sink it, but enough to worry someone who lives by careful margins. Water in the hold means the ship is talking to you in a language you must respect. Sometimes it's a whisper. Sometimes it's a warning. And if you misread it, you don't get a second lesson. They checked the pump system because a tired pump turns manageable trouble into panic. On a wooden vessel, we can handle it can become we should leave in one long night of bailing. If the crew believed water was winning, launching the lifeboat might have felt rational. But then why abandon a ship that was still sailing? Then they noticed something subtle. Certain navigation necessities were missing. Not valuables in the greedy sense, essentials in the survival sense. The kind of things you take only if you plan to live in the small boat and find land. That detail shifts the story from attack to evacuation. But it also begs a darker question. What made evacuation feel safer than the ship? Now, the theories start fighting for space. Piracy. But there's no obvious plunder, no wreckage, no slaughter. Mutiny. But mutiny usually leaves a new captain, not an empty ship. So the mystery tightens around a more human possibility, a misread danger. The kind of danger that feels immediate, smells real, and turns disciplined sailors into people who choose the lifeboat. Consider the cargo itself. Alcohol vapor is invisible, but it changes everything. One leak, one pressure shift, one fear of explosion, and suddenly the safest place might feel like open air. If the crew heard a bang from the hold or smelled something they couldn't control, they might have cut loose into the lifeboat temporarily. Temporary decisions at sea are the ones that kill you, because temporary can drift. Picture it. The crew in the lifeboat, holding a line to the ship, keeping distance until they're sure the danger is gone. The ship keeps moving, tugging, pulling, demanding attention. One wrong wave, one snapped rope, one moment of exhaustion, then the ship is suddenly out of reach. And the worst part is, from the ship's perspective, nothing happened at all. It just sailed on. Without them, that scenario explains the clean ship. It explains the missing lifeboat. It even explains why the ship was still seaworthy. But it replaces one mystery with another. Why risk the lifeboat at all, unless the threat felt bigger than wind and water? Something convinced them the ship itself had become the danger. And if that belief was wrong, the mistake was irreversible. Now zoom out to the other crew, the ones who found the Mary Celeste. They weren't detectives. They were sailors who understood how quickly a fortunate discovery becomes a curse. Because once you step aboard, the ship becomes your responsibility, and every decision leaves a paper trail. But the sea doesn't grade intent, it only grades outcomes. And outcomes were about to drag everyone into trouble. Salvage law meant money if they could prove they found the ship abandoned and brought it to port. But money is suspicious by nature. The moment they claimed the Mary Celeste, a second story began. Not only what happened to the missing crew, but did the rescuers do something to make them missing? And once that suspicion exists, it never completely dies. The ship was taken toward port under tense skies, watched like a witness that couldn't speak. Every creak of timber felt like evidence. Every missing item felt like motive. Yet the Mary Celeste kept offering the same frustrating truth. It wasn't a wreck. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a functioning ship that had simply been emptied. And that contradiction is exactly what makes people invent monsters. At the hearing, officials tried to force a clean answer from an unclean mystery. They looked for contradictions, for greed, for a storyline with a villain. But the sea rarely gives you villains you can name. More often, it gives you a chain reaction. One small leak, one fearful moment, one decision that seems reasonable. Until it becomes fatal. And then all you have is silence. If it was murder, why leave the ship intact and valuable? If it was piracy, why not strip it clean? If it was mutiny, why not sail it home? Each obvious answer fails against the same stubborn fact. The Mary Celeste was found still capable of crossing an ocean. That pushes us back to the lifeboat, because the lifeboat is the one action that explains everything and condemns everyone. Imagine the moment of decision. A smell in the hold, a sound that shouldn't exist, water where there shouldn't be water. The captain, weighing risk like a mathematician, stay aboard and gamble against fire or sinking. Or step into the lifeboat to buy time. He doesn't need certainty. He only needs to believe the ship might kill them. And belief is enough to launch a boat. But the ocean punishes by time decisions. A lifeboat is small, slow, and brutally honest. If the rope line snaps, you don't chase a ship, you watch it leave you behind. And if fog drops or wind shifts, you don't find it again. You become a dot in a world that doesn't keep dots. That's how a temporary evacuation becomes permanent disappearance. And it also explains why there were no bodies to find. The sea doesn't return people on schedule. It returns fragments, sometimes years later, sometimes never. A lifeboat without navigation, certainty becomes a moving problem with no solution. And if the crew drifted for days, the end wouldn't be dramatic. It would be quiet. Quiet is the ocean's favorite ending. So why is the Mary Celeste still famous? Because it looks like a crime scene without a crime. A ship that should tell a story but refuses. The emptiness feels staged, even if it wasn't. And that makes the human brain panic. It wants a culprit. It wants a monster. But history's scariest mysteries often need neither. They just need one misread signal and a boat in the water. The investigation couldn't pin down a clean motive, and that uncertainty became fuel. The more officials doubted the rescuers, the more the story spread, because suspicion is contagious. Yet suspicion doesn't explain the missing lifeboat in a way that fits the ship's condition. The Mary Celeste keeps forcing us back to the same fork in the road. Either someone took them, or they left themselves. If they left themselves, then the ship didn't kill them. Distance did. The gap between boat and ship becomes an abyss when wind turns against you, and the most chilling detail is how believable it is. You can feel the moment. The captain saying just for now, the crew trusting the line, the ship still moving. Then one wave, and the plan is gone. The Mary Celeste kept sailing because ships don't need people to drift. They only need wind and balance. That's the nightmare. The vessel survives, the humans don't, and the evidence becomes meaningless. It's like finding an intact car on an empty road with the engine still warmex, that the road is an ocean, and the ocean erases witnesses. That's why the case refuses to close. There's no final scene, only missing time. And missing time is where imagination becomes aggressive. People insert pirates, sea monsters, secret conspiracies. But the real story may be simpler and crueler. A competent crew made a rational choice under imperfect information, and the ocean punished it. That kind of ending is terrifying because it can happen to anyone. Here's the most haunting reconstruction. The lifeboat stays tethered while they wait out a perceived threat. Fumes. Water, something unstable below. The ship continues to creep forward. The rope tightens, hands slip, a knot fails, and in seconds the Mary Celeste becomes unreachable. No gunshots, no screams, just physics. But then why would the captain risk separating his family from the ship at all? That question is the hook that keeps pulling people back, because it implies the perceived threat wasn't minor. It felt existential. It felt like stay aboard and die. And whether that feeling came from a real danger or a false alarm doesn't matter to the outcome. At sea, fear is a kind of weather. Once it arrives, it controls everything. Once the crew is gone, the Mary Celeste becomes a drifting argument. Every port retelling sharpens it. Every retelling adds details that weren't there. But the core remains stubborn. Intact ship, missing lifeboat, missing people. That trio doesn't point to one answer, points to one moment. The moment they stepped off their own protection and trusted the sea instead. And that's why it's viral even now. The mystery is visual. You can see it without diagrams. A silent ship, a missing boat, a horizon with no land. It plays like a film because it behaves like a film. Setup, tension, reveal, then the ending disappears before you can grab it. The audience stays because they keep expecting the missing scene, and it never arrives. So when you build the visuals, lean into the ordinary turned wrong. Not horror, not gore. Just normal objects left behind. Rope, bowls, a coat, a quiet cabin. Because that's where the fear lives, the sense that life was here a moment ago. And if life was here a moment ago, then the moment it left must have had a reason. And that reason is still out there. By the end, the Mary Celeste isn't a ghost story. It's a decision story. A chain of cause and effect that starts with a perceived threat and ends with distance. The ship lived because ships can survive without hope. The people vanished because humans can't. And the cruel trick is that the ship's survival makes their loss feel impossible, which keeps the mystery alive. And we still don't have the missing piece. What exactly did they think was happening in those final hours? Water, fire, fumes, a threat they misjudged? The record can't tell us, because the only witnesses were the people who stepped into the lifeboat, which means the truth is locked inside one private moment of fear. And the ocean kept the key. If you've made it this far, you already feel why this case lasts. It's not supernatural, it's plausible. And plausible is worse because it means the same chain could happen again. One wrong assumption, one rope under strain, one fog bank at the wrong time. Then a ship becomes a moving tomb with no bodies inside. And now the final question is yours. Because your answer reveals what you fear most. If you want more documentaries built like cinematic mysteries, subscribe because the next episode dives into another real moment where one decision triggers everything. And now, tell me in the comments, do you think the Mary Celeste crew fled a real danger or a false alarm, and what single clue in this story feels most decisive to you?